if we have 5 people on our committee here, that makes a quorum, right? Okay. I know Jim is coming, but because our time might be very full tonight, I think we ought to begin. So I want to welcome Kimberly McPhee and Tamsin Flanders from the Franklin Regional Council of Governments here to talk to us about the watershed-based plan for Lake Wyola. The way the agenda reads for tonight will be that we'll, and I guess Tom will be taking the minutes. So we've officially opened the meeting, Tom. And we're going to just get a vote on the approval of the minutes from the last meeting. And then we'll turn it over to Kimberly and Tamsin. On our agenda, it mentions a public comment period prior to their presentation, but I'm going to propose that we move that public comment period to the end of the meeting, since many of the things we're working on and conversations around those details will likely happen in the context of their presentation, but we will have an opening for public comment at the end of the meeting. Okay, so how about, does anyone have any comments about the minutes from the last meeting that Tom has circulated? Any corrections or any kind of comments? Good. Very thorough.
Good minutes.
Jennifer, we can't vote on them yet until we have another person, though, I think, right?
We have 5 people here.
Yeah, 5 of us here.
Sorry, okay.
Yep, we can vote on.
If we
Okay,
get a motion in a second.
we need a motion. So if there are
we
no,
approve the minutes.
right, okay, there's one, and can I second it as the chair?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, okay, I'll second it. So let's have a vote. I vote aye. Wallace, aye.
McNaughton, aye.
Joe Salvador, aye.
Stalker, aye.
Secret aye. Thank you, everyone.
Okay, good. So I understand from communications that I've had with Kimberly that Kimberly and Tamsin have a PowerPoint presentation that they're going to start with that will put us all on the same page. And then we'll move into some of the questions that we've sent them in advance and any other items that come up naturally in the course of the discussion. Does that sound okay to you all? Okay, good. And once again, thanks so much for coming and being so generous with your time and our very extensive list of questions. And I will turn it over to you guys.
Great, thank you. I'm going to lead us off. Jennifer, can I share, or can you share hosting with me, or whoever is hosting the meeting?
Yeah, now how do I do that?
You go to more. No, you go to participants.
You might already have screen share. If you check.
Oh.
That's what you hear.
Sure enough. Thank you.
Yeah, okay. I think it was separate. Sorry, friend.
You are seeing probably the thing with the black, like the presenter view, aren't you?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. How is it now?
Better.
Great. So yeah, great to see you all, see everyone who I have met before and meet some new folks. Thank you for having us. What this presentation is gonna start with is just a little bit of review of how we started this project or the watershed-based plan and level set. From your questions, it feels like you know the plan really well. I worry that you now know it better than me. But just gonna go through that again, and then look at your goals the way I interpreted them from Jennifer's email to us, just to make sure we're understanding things right, and then go through your questions. I have put them on slides, just it helped me to sort of group like questions together and do a little bit of, I did a little bit of rewording so that they would fit on the slides, but that's what the plan from our end is. So we, Kimberly and I were, the FERCog was awarded a grant from the Department of Environmental Protection under what's called their Regional Coordinator grant. And the idea behind the Regional Coordinator was that we were looking at all of the watersheds in our region, understanding where their priorities might be for working on water quality. We based a lot of that on where we were seeing state listed water quality impairments. And so all the way back in probably 2021, we connected with Mark Rivers and the town and decided to work with Lake Wyola as one of the 3 watershed-based plans that we created under the grant. And as some of you know, it took a few years for that to be finished, and it was finished in, I guess it was finally finished in September. So watershed-based plans are based on an EPA standard for water quality planning, watershed-based plans. This was funded by the Clean Water Act, and the purpose of watershed-based plans are to conduct like high-level planning for impaired and healthy watersheds, identifying past and current water quality conditions, known causes and sources of non-point source pollution, likely causes, sources of non-point source pollution, identify where there are data gaps, prioritize those problems and threats to the extent that is needed or possible, understand what the water quality standards that should be applying to that water body are, and set pollutant load reduction goals to meet those standards, and then identifying appropriate best management practices for that watershed to meet those goals. Best management practices, which usually means like sort of the more hands-on practices, like they might be structural, they might be non-structural, but sort of like the geographically specific management practices, and then watershed-based strategies. Then many other practices can be sort of more general management or zoning or different broader strategies. And so watershed-based plans are required for one of the 3 major grants that we're going to share about, the 319 non-point source competitive grant fund. So now that you have your watershed-based plan, you are eligible for that grant. And it's also can be really helpful for other water quality grants and just for what you're doing, which is planning strategies, planning projects to apply for funding. So for Lake Wyola, we found, I'm just gonna minimize this myself so I can see my whole slide. Myself view, okay. And I realized as I was like pulling these, going back through the plan and pulling these sources of pollutant loading, I worded them differently in this slide than they're worded in the plan, but this is sort of my understanding of what we found in the plan. So likely sources of pollutant loading are, actually, I want to go to the next slide because what I didn't put in this previous slide, if you look to the right, where I have Lake Wyola watershed-based plan, water quality load reduction goals, we have a goal of reducing total phosphorus to protect existing high quality water. So currently, Lake Wyola is listed as impaired for phosphorus. based on data from 2000 that was later questioned in public comment as being potentially inaccurate. And the impairment has never been kind of revised or the listing has never been revised to say that there's no impairment. But I think it's a value to everyone that it stay listed as impaired, because that helps people orient towards the need to keep phosphorus low in Lake Wyola. And also, I think it just helps you be more eligible for funding for the kinds of projects you're looking for. And then the second thing is sediment, and Lake Wyola is not listed for sediment, but we know anecdotally through all of you and through photos we've seen that there's a lot of sediment accumulation in Lake Wyola. So that is the second kind of water quality goal that is the focus of the plan. So what are the likely sources of total phosphorus and sediment? We have erosion of driveways and unpaved roads around the lake. We linked that to increased precipitation and runoff, which is happening with changing precipitation patterns with climate change. Lack of road maintenance isn't necessarily that there isn't road maintenance being done, but that there is more road maintenance that could be done for unpaved roads to help protect them from erosion. And then increased impervious surface and increased road use over time as more people have become year-round residents around the lake. Impervious surface and lawn. So I'll just say that phosphorus is a somewhat naturally occurring chemical compound. I forget where it fits into that chemistry, but it's very common for it to come from paved and unpaved roads. And then it's common for it to come from fertilizers and like things like manure. So impervious surface and lawn can be a source. Lawn is not much better than impervious surface as far as absorbing water. So we want to just make sure that's clear to folks that lawn isn't a great absorbent or infiltrator of stormwater runoff. Another source, lack of treatment of stormwater in the road drainage system. So again, like this isn't to call you out as doing anything differently than any other town, but treatment of stormwater in the road drainage system can, if it existed, it would be helping water quality be better than it is currently. And then upstream fluvial geomorphic impairments. Fluvial geomorphology is a very fancy term that we love at the FERCOG, and it's plainly spoken, it talks about how the river relates to the land surrounding it. So when there's has been historic land use alteration of the river and the river channel, it's very common that streams and rivers actually kind of have to do a lot more adjusting in order to find their dynamic equilibrium, and that leads to more erosion than in a kind of what we call healthy river. And then I guess I said earlier, I was hinting at this earlier with lawn, and that landscaping additives and animal feces can be sources for non-point source pollution like phosphorus and sediment, like phosphorus in that case. And we know from you, so even though that water quality, our watershed-based plan has to really focus on these sources of non-point source pollution, we know that sediment accumulation in the lake is a concern for the Lake Wyola and Shutesbury community because of how it's impacting the environment and recreation. We know that erosion on roads is impacting drivability and maybe people's lawns, and also the towns and the Lake Wyola Association's budgets. Bank erosion of the lake is a concern for the community, and then there are concerns about upstream beaver dams and what impact there might have been in the past and might be in the future. And then, so the watershed-based plan identifies these sort of general areas for opportunities to do some work. So there's lots of ways to continue studying the issues. And that's, I think, a lot of what you're interested in. We'll talk more about all of those sub-bullets, I'm sure. And then voluntary residential stormwater and landscaping best management practices. So these aren't something that you necessarily go out and get funding for. You could, I mean, some residential PMPs you could under certain circumstances, but mostly encouraging voluntary kind of change voluntary implementation of better management practices and changing attitudes towards landscaping and stuff like that. Constructed stormwater BMPs on public and private roads and land, water quality monitoring, and also monitoring of the stormwater best management practices that are in existence, education and outreach, and then sort of that broader management and maintenance that I was talking about. So I wanted to just pause there and see if anyone had any questions about anything I just said. Because I think this is what the plan was communicating, but if you're reading anything, if you all who have read it are interpreting anything differently, or have questions about it, I just wanted to, again, like, check for understanding here.
People could raise hand here. Eric has his hand up.
It is my only question. This is great, but will we get a copy of this whole slide presentation? I
I can
assume
give you,
that's
yeah,
great.
free
That's
for you
all
to
I need.
use
Thank
however
you.
you need to.
You can't write this fast. Yeah.
Tracy has her hand up.
Yes, I just wanted to ask a question about animal feces. Phosphorus comes from animal feces?
You know, as I was saying that, I was like, oh, I think nitrogen is more of the
Mm.
concern with animal feces.
Okay, I just,
But I
well,
think there is a little bit, I think it can be a source for phosphorus.
okay, I guess I just didn't even think about either of those. I just thought about it as like E. coli, but there's also an issue with, that's very interesting and important. Thank you.
Tamsin, can I ask a question, please?
Yeah, of course.
Is it a fair paraphrase to say that I don't even know if it's the right terms, but the two like non-source, or I forget the word for non-source pollutant. Is that the right phrase we should
We
use?
say non-source point because it's
Non-source
not coming
point
from like a
pollutant.
single
Right.
outlet.
Okay. So they are essentially phosphorus and lead. Is that a fair? And there aren't other ones that we're looking at?
That's an awesome question. So Lake Wyola is listed in the state's what's called the 303D integrated list of waters. You can check it out, and it's fun to kind of browse through and compare to other water bodies. And that gets released by the state every 2 years, and different kind of regions data gets checked and it gets updated every 2 years. So Lake Wyola is listed for total phosphorus, and with there's some interesting language in there about like biological indications of that. And then it's also listed for I think one invasive plant.
Oh, really?
And the invasive plants aren't really something that is covered by this grant source stream. Nitrogen, I think, is always a concern. We don't see nitrogen levels that exceed the standard very much in Franklin County and maybe in Western Mass, but the Long Island Sound is highly impaired for nitrogen, and so there is an effort up and down the Connecticut River watershed to reduce nitrogen because it's the total accumulation loading into the Long Island Sound. Kimberly, would you add anything else to that
I would just say that there's a kind of a tension between how much data we have or don't have and what our knowledge is for the water quality, and then what can we do, or what kinds of projects do we know that we can do that will be protective of water quality, or maybe mitigate some of the impairments that we might not know that we have, because many of the projects that are proposed in the watershed-based plan would gather information that would be really helpful to in order to design projects that would address kind of a wide variety of impairments. So just because we don't have data that are showing, you know, a problem with some of these other pollutants doesn't mean that there's not a concentration in the lake. We just don't know. I think the other thing to keep in mind too with this system is that it appears to have a pretty high turnover rate or flushing, right? So yeah, there's just a lot that we don't know. And so the challenge is, what kinds of studies and assessments are kind of the most cost effective and would give us the most useful information to design projects that would actually show some improvements on the ground. And so I think I would leave it there for now, Tamsin, if that was helpful.
Yeah, that was a really great point. And just as an example, water bodies can be impaired for temperature as well, and increased pervious surfaces around that stream system or lake system will increase temperatures. And I personally haven't read up on impacts to lake habitat, but I think we can anticipate whether or not it's ever going to get recorded for Lake Wyola. We can anticipate higher temperatures just because of rising average temperatures in the air.
So we have 3 questions. Tracy, your hand is up. Is that an old hand up or a new hand up?
It's new, but you can let Joe and James go first because since I've already had a turn.
Okay, so Joe, you were first and then Jim.
So I have a question because I live near the state beach and I noticed that this past year we've been having a lot more geese living on the lake and actually on the state beach. And every morning, literally we're picking up like a 5-gallon pail of goose droppings. But then they do a water test over there, and this past year, the beach was closed more than it ever was. Could that be a factor?
Yeah, I love the question. I don't know. That's not my area of expertise at all. I'm not a scientist. I imagine it can be a factor, but I wish I had more information for you.
And how about Jim?
Okay, excuse me. Been sick for about a couple months, and so I'm just re-entering the world here. That I was just wondering if we could request a slight change in the language, given that there has been a challenge to the phosphorus data. And I even remember reading that there was at least some attempt to measure phosphorus that was lower and indicated that there was not a high phosphorus level. Can we just change the language to maintain a low phosphorus level, given that we have no data saying it is high?
Are you
asking,
asking just as we're talking or as an amendment to the watershed-based plan?
If there's evidence for high phosphate levels in the lake, then I would think we would put resources towards addressing that problem. Given that the data that suggested it has been challenged, and we have no real evidence, just asking for it to maintain low levels of phosphate, so that the issues that we do have with sedimentation can really be put in the forefront and not be balanced with a problem we may not really have. I mean, we could still deal with education and have people educate people to not fertilize and the problems with lawns and the problems of fertilizing lawns and all of that. But in terms of any of the structures that would be developed, it's not clear that we have a problem, except for Joe's mention of possibly the state beach being a source of more than sediment problems. So is there any chance to change the language, given there's no data that supports there being high phosphorus levels?
Yeah, I think my question was more geared towards which language do you want to change in this slideshow?
And this would just be to where it says reduction of total phosphorus.
Yeah, yeah.
We can just put to maintain low phosphorus levels to protect high quality of water, something
Okay.
of that sort.
Okay.
That is a little more wishy-washy, admittedly, but doesn't state a problem that we don't have real data to support.
I think we might need to realize kind of a situation where DEP because, as Tamsin mentioned, the lake is listed for phosphorus as impaired. DEP is the only entity that can delist it or take that language out. And because it has an impairment, whether it's real or not, or based on faulty data, the fact that it does have that listed impairment elevates it on the list for fundable projects. And so phosphorus will bind to sediment. I think Tamsin, if I'm remembering correctly, like the pollutant loading analysis that we did, because so much of the watershed is forested, there's just a lot of naturally occurring phosphorus loading that's happening from forested areas as well. So I think, we might want to, I understand the concern about the existing language, but I wonder if there's a way to address your concern, Jim, but
my concern would only be that while the sedimentation is a real and obvious problem, that any grants or proposals we submit would be criticized for not addressing phosphorus sufficiently.
I think that so that is a good concern to raise, or a good point to raise. I don't think that would necessarily be the case, depending on the project that was proposed, because there is documentation available to show that certain stormwater management measures will reduce phosphorus loading. Like I said, managing the sediment that's entering the lake, that would potentially reduce the phosphorus loading. But I think it's, you're bringing up some good points, and I see Tamsin taking some notes, and probably other people are as well. And so, keeping all this in mind as proposals or project ideas start floating to the surface, so you can circle back around. And they're good questions, at some point, once the task force has done more work, kind of come to consensus on next steps and project types, you know, you can talk to the grant funders about your ideas. And so these would be good questions to bring up with the grant funders and get their feedback on how things should be framed so the applications are the most competitive.
Okay,
That's
thank you for your
helpful. And
comment.
so
Address.
I don't know how you all are feeling, Kimberly and Tamsin, about moving forward, but I see Mark Rivers has a hand up. Joe's hand is still up, and I'm assuming that's a new question. Joe and Tracy has a question. So how should we proceed? Do you think it's good to work with these questions right now, or do you feel, Kimberly, that you'd like to move to another part of your presentation?
The only other slide we had was about your goals before we had your questions on a slide. So it's really up to you. I think we're
Okay.
fine either way.
So let's see, Mark, are you taking it back your question?
No, actually, I'll ask it really quickly. It's wasn't the best course of action to actually measure the phosphorus content as it is now, and then we'll have real data. Because the last time there was data recorded was, I think, 10 years ago.
That was a comment, Mark, right? Not a question.
Well, no, it was a question. Shouldn't we be
Oh.
using
Yeah.
the best course of action to measure the current phosphorus levels?
So I have a certain bias about this, so I might not be the best person to answer that question because of my bias about I personally feel, or my professional / personal opinion is that grant funds are better spent gathering the type of data that we've proposed here in the watershed-based plan and crafting projects based on the hydraulic and hydrologic studies, the fluvial geomorphic assessments. Tamsin, you may want to share your opinion about this, but doing more water quality sampling will kind of prolong kind of the whole process, number one. The data you get back, I mean, it may be useful. How is that data going to inform the types of projects that you want to do? I think that's the question that could be talked about and explored more deeply. Is the water quality data going to inform the projects more or better than the H&H studies, the fluvial geomorphic studies? In my opinion, no, but I'm just one voice. So,
Kimberly,
like I
would you
said, I'm very biased about that.
would you actually take a minute to describe what the H&H study looks at and how it's useful, and then also the FGM?
Sure. So the hydraulic and hydrologic study, also known as an H&H study, is something that it's models that engineers use to evaluate how the water moves, how the water is moving through a watershed system, how the water is collected, how the water is transported, where you can use the results of H&H modeling to do a number of things. They can be used like in flood resilience, project design, stormwater management in particular. And so kind of the companion study to that is a fluvial geomorphic assessment. So as Tamsin mentioned, fluvial geomorphology is the science that studies how rivers interact with their landscape. So the H&H study is giving you information kind of about what happens when the rain falls on the ground, right? What happens to that water as it moves through over the land. And the geomorphic study is giving you information about how the river system is moving across the land surface, how it's eroding, etc. So with that kind of whole system understanding of the watershed that Lake Wyola is part of, fluvial geomorphologists, river scientists, engineers can help design like the projects that are going to move that system back to equilibrium and address sources, these sources of pollution, whether it's sediment loading, stormwater runoff. So to me, and we've done a lot of these watershed scale studies in the western part of Franklin County, and they've been very successful in terms of yielding lists of projects and linking those projects to specific problems. The water quality, so again, the types of projects that would come out of the H&H and the fluvial geomorphic assessment would likely be the same projects potentially that would be identified if it was found that the lake still had a high total phosphorus concentration. But what if the lake doesn't have a high total phosphorus concentration anymore? You're not going to do the sediment control projects, or you're not going to do the stormwater management projects. And I'm just asking those kind of as rhetorical questions, because again, it's like, what is the information that the assessment work is going to give you, and how can you get the most bang for your buck?
Thank you. That's very clarifying. Let's just catch up with some of these questions. Tracy's had her hands up for a while. Jim has his hand up still. I had a short question. So Tracy.
Okay. Well, my question kind of ties into what Kimberly was just saying, and I guess I just want to clarify, Kimberly, in a nutshell. I think what I hear you saying is that there would be no reason to add more data, change change anything in terms of the phosphorus, because having those the idea that we were on the radar for phosphorus is helpful in terms of our ultimate grant funding. And then connected to that was my question that I originally raised my hand for, is that it looks like you all got the funding for this program, this watershed-based plan from the 319 grant funding, which is what I was tasked with researching a little bit. And so my question is that it's a state funding, so you all had to apply to the state to get the funding. And what I've read, I think I understand that private entities can also apply to the state, but I was wondering if they have to go through their town. Like Lake Wyola Association has to go through the town that applies to the state, if you know anything about that.
Wow, there was a lot in that.
Sorry. If
I
it's
think
too
I'll
much
try.
for now, don't worry about it. But
Well, let's see. I think so. Starting with like the last part first. The application would be the strongest, to the program project, or request for funding would be the strongest if it came from the town, with the Lake Wyola Association, as a project partner, because there has to be like a good infrastructure in place for project administration, right? The town can hire a consultant, the town could hire the COG, But because some of the roads, are privately owned, and the rest of the roads are managed by the town, I think the strongest application has like a unified voice between it's a public-private partnership. Does that answer your question?
It does answer my question. Just keeping in mind, however, that Lake Wyola Association is a public charity and not a homeowners association. So I don't know if that also gives them a little bit more oomph in getting grant funding, or with that public-private partnership makes them a little bit higher on the list for eligibility. That's my hope.
Yeah, I don't know. My sense would be no, but again, that's a great question to ask the DEP directly. The Lakewide, and I think there could be just a size and a capacity concern. I mean, the Connecticut River Conservancy, for example, is a nonprofit, but they're a big organization. They've been around for a long time. So yeah, I don't think I can answer that question definitively. Those are just my opinions. I don't have any, I'm just trying to think if I can think of another, like a smaller nonprofit that's applied to the program.
One of your collective questions was, do we have any examples of public-private partnership projects? And we don't in our region, to my knowledge. But I think one place you might think about looking is some of the lakes out in Berkshire County. I believe they have received some 319 funding. And so if you can browse, there's a few documents on the DEP's 319-604B, or what do they call it? The non-point programs website, with lists of past projects, and you can see if you recognize any lakes in there, and you could try to get in touch.
Because I will say the reporting for this grant is particularly onerous. So, you want to make sure that you have the capacity to deal with the reporting.
When you say reporting, do you mean that you the follow through after you receive the grant money that you had for maintenance of a maintenance plan for continued?
Well, so an operation and maintenance plan is generally a requirement for any like in the ground project that's funded, like a stormwater management structure. I was referring to the quarterly reporting that's required, and this is a reimbursement grant, so the funds have to be the money has to be expended, and then you file a request for reimbursement, which includes a quarterly progress report. It's federal pass-through money, so they're disadvantaged business enterprise fair share goals. I mean, I don't want to get like off on a tangent on this. I think just the takeaway is that it's a administratively heavy lift, especially if you've never done one before. I mean, the COG, we've had many 319 grants. So, but we still can run into little glitches and challenges with the administrative side of things. And I don't want to discourage you from going for it. I'm just trying to, like, I want you to have a realistic, understanding of what's involved.
I'm just going to sort of pull back on the question I was going to ask and say that I think what I'm really hearing is that, and I believe from reading the report and even this presentation, that you all have set Shutesbury and the Lake Wyola Association up for the step of identifying projects or doing the engine or hiring the engineers who would do the two studies that you recommend to move from your watershed-based plan to a project level phase, I guess. Is that, do I have that right? Yes. Did I ask my question clearly enough?
Yeah,
Yeah, I think that, go ahead, Kimberly.
oh, I was gonna say yes. I think, you know, we feel that some additional assessment work needs to be done, those studies that we talked about. So that could be the next step. And then out of that study, if you look at the ones that we've done with grant funding for watersheds in the western part of the county, which Tamsin could share those with you all for links to those reports. You'll see that one of the deliverables in that work is a list of projects. And
so it
then,
seems that where we, you know, because there's so much to, I mean, this is like someone said to me from Concom, you guys have your work cut out for you, and we do, right?
yeah.
But I believe what I'm hearing and is that our focus should really be on trying to get the funding necessary to conduct these two kinds of studies, the engineering study, the H&H study, and the fluvial geomorphic study, and that the projects, rather than us identifying projects, that the projects would emerge from these two studies.
Yes, and remember the work too that Tamsin did with many of you already to develop the watershed-based plan. I mean, a lot of the existing information has already been distilled. Tamsin has that. I think it's in the presentation, you know, the map of kind of like the study areas. So you're definitely not starting from scratch. Like you already have a lot of good information to share as part of an RFP that you would put out, right, to hire the consultant to do this work. And there's probably even more work that you could do between now and, you know, when a grant application is prepared to, you know, further maybe clarify some of the issues and concerns. Although, I mean, maybe, you know, you might feel that the watershed-based plan has touched upon that really well already.
Okay. So
Kimberly, I am curious what you think. So we encourage the H&H particularly because it can help prioritize sites if you're understanding better where water is moving across the landscape and where it's going to be moving most intensely or intensively. And also that is can be really essential information for designing climate resilient best management kind of structural components so that you're sizing them to future storm sizes for that exact location. And the FGM study, that would be focused on the Fisk Brook system. And for a lot, like I understand that the sedimentation of North Cove is a major concern, and because forest is such a high kind of component of where phosphorus is coming, and it could be moving through that system, a lot of it could be moving through that system. Like, Kimberly, do you have any thoughts on like if they had to choose between H&H and an FGM, or if they were really thinking about like doing road and residential stormwater BMPs versus working on Fisk Brook, any potential problems there? Like what how one would prioritize.
Yeah. So I think I would have to think about that a little bit more and maybe understand or have some more discussions with you all. And I think really trying to do both of the studies at the same time is the best approach. And we did that for the Clessenbrook watershed in Buckland. And so the town applied for a 604B grant, which is one of the ones that is linked to the 319 grants. And they also applied for an MVP grant, the Municipal Vulnerability Preparedness Program. So Shutesbury is a designated MVP community, so you're eligible for that grant funding as well. The nice thing about applying for both of those grants at the same time is that if there is a match required for either one of them, they can match each other because MVP is state money, 319 is federal pass-through money. So it really, yeah, ideally you would do them together or concurrently. But if you had to choose, it seems like one or the other, maybe doing the H&H study for the stormwater management, you would all consider that to be the priority, just based on what I know from conversations I've had with Tamsin in reading the plan. Would you, I don't know what Tamsin, if that would make sense.
I think that would be my sense because of just the number of opportunities there would be that come out of that. And I don't know how much of Fishbrook is on public land versus private land, but
Yeah.
restoration projects on private land I think would be harder than like a series of stormwater management projects on and it it has the co-benefits of reducing the erosion that is on roads and that's seemingly hard for residents around the lake to deal with on their own.
Well, and it's also a lot more visible too. So in terms of garnering, public support and enthusiasm for the work, it would be highly visible, I would think.
Tracy, you can go first and then I'll ask my question.
I was just going to say that the Fishbrook system involves Wendell too. So I don't know. Can two towns apply for grant funding together? Like you said, public private in the same town, but does that happen too?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, especially the MVP program loves to see like watershed scale or, two municipalities working together. Ashfield and Conway work together on an MVP funded project for the South River watershed because they share that watershed.
Thank you.
And Kimberly, something like an H&H and an FGM can be done for a watershed that spans multiple towns without another town having to be an applicant, right? Like a lot of the work is desktop analysis, and then some of it is actually walking the river system. And usually we notify people that we have staff out there, but the center of the brook is not owned by anyone.
Yeah. So for the Clessenbrook example, the town of Buckland was the applicant, and the COG was the applicant for the 604B grant. And then we just coordinated because Pleasant Brook includes portions of the towns of Ashfield and Holly. And so we just coordinated with those towns through their town administrators, made sure all of the public engagement materials and the outreach included the portions of those other towns that were in the watershed.
I have my hand up because and I know this question came up on our list maybe in a variety of different ways, but it's the same question, which is, so we have this situation where we have public property at municipal owned roads and property, and then these roads that are owned by not just roads, but also whole drainage, dynamics that are part of the nonprofit Lake Wyola Association. It seems like we are always stumbling around these jurisdictional issues. And I did read that the Massachusetts Environmental Trust seems to be okay with doing projects that involve public and private, but I just wonder whether you have some perspective on how to bridge this possible obstacle.
So I haven't been involved in a project that has this much or as many kind of wrinkles or challenges as this one potentially would have. One thing that is probably obvious is that these grants are they're public funds. So spending public money on private lands, there has to be some assurance that the structure that's being built, for example, is going to be maintained, is going to not be destroyed or paved over or ripped up. So would that involve easements? I don't know. I mean, this is maybe something the task force could explore with the town, with town council, like what would be the legal structure that would need to be put into place, because the grant funder is absolutely going to want assurance that these structures aren't going to be ripped out by the next property owner or something like that. So an easement might be the way to go. The stormwater work that we've done in the past, for example, has been within like a town road right of way, so you don't have those issues. We did have a project. It didn't get funded, but it was a flood resiliency project that involved a private landowner who was willing to have the work done on his property, and he was working with the Franklin Land Trust, so he was going to have a conservation restriction on his property, and that was the kind of like the closest I came to something that involved a public-private partnership. And so again, those are good questions to try to get some clarification from the DEP, like what exactly, and the MVP program, what exactly would they like to see? I am remembering in the MVP application that they had some language about specific information that needed to be submitted with the grant application. So the Lake Wyola Association, they don't own the roads, it's each individual property owner.
No, they do own the roads.
They do own the roads. So I don't know, like, would you need a survey done? I mean, this is like uncharted territory in
Okay, well,
some respects.
because we're down at the project level, so I want to move on to these other questions, but let's say to apply for funding for an H&H study, would it be an obstacle that the H&H study would cover land that was both publicly owned and privately owned? Okay,
No.
so these other things will come up when we get to the project level.
Yes.
Okay, so Jim, you had your hand up.
There. Well, can we go back to the map for a second? Do you have the zone map? Because we did a good bit of on the ground, walking around the lake and walking in each of those zones. And we had kind of moved towards more micro drainage type of bit than site 4 and site 2, where that, there's Locks Pond Road, site 4, and there are the culverts that go under it and drain onto private land, individual held land, that people may or may not have put in PVC pipe and the like to bring it down to Lake Road, Lake Drive, there's site 2. And there's either a private or lake association culvert that goes under the road, which may or may not have a sediment trap, very hands-on, low-tech sediment trap there, which then crosses under the road, which may, in several cases does, hook up to a private landowner's PVC pipe that goes to the lake. So that each, and I don't know how many projects of this micro drainage sort, but it is very useful, I think, to not cut up things by the ownership issue, but to get into the flow of water of coming through the culverts off of Locks Pond and to the place where we know from photos and other reports that we're getting sedimentation into the lake. And part of it is, can we kind of, in the H&H type of proposal, hook in a bunch of these micro drainages as being focused for the hydrology study? Because that's, that you wanted to talk about things being complicated. It's, yes, there are PVC pipes running under private property, homeowner property, and getting easements. I don't know about how that would work. I think I have a sense of what the Lake Wyola Association would do for putting in best practice type of sediment traps along the roads. But then that goes under the road to private property again. So the success of any of these proposals cuts across all of these different sorts of property issues. And part of your discussion just led to my just very disheartened sort of feeling that I got of any single project involving all 3 of these types of levels of ownership to actually create a functional type of way of moving. It is a basin, water goes downhill, but we can control it, but it takes a type of cooperation and funding. If each and every one of those needs to be paid for, at least part of it paid for in advance to be reimbursed, that's like the second stab in the heart that I felt of having private landowners pay up front and promising them reimbursement at some point. I don't know how successful we could ever get on getting agreement to do this. And I just so this may be a unique type of case, but just wanted to be upfront that these are some of the issues before, so staying out of the projects. We need to look at how the projects cut across all these different sorts of properties, and that has to be part of the hydrological study included in what can be done with all these different sorts of property holdings.
Yeah, and and as you were talking and I was looking at the map, I'm thinking, and this, would be like a challenge for the engineers, right? Like once they know where where the water's going, how much water is coming into the system, kind of where it's going across the landscape, where can the water be captured and managed in areas that are, you know, maybe they still might be private property, but it's not kind of at the individual parcel or homeowner level. Maybe there are other areas that could have, you know, structures to manage the stormwater. I don't know, but
There are a few parcels in the Lake Wyola Association area that are owned by the town.
yeah.
So that might,
So that might be, you know, so yeah, it's going to be very, very, it's going to be very challenging. There's no question about it. But we just need to be creative, keep thinking outside the box.
And Kimberly, can you just clarify, Jim, you were worried about homeowners getting reimbursed? If we were ever going for a 319 implementation grant, it wouldn't be homeowners fronting the costs of the project, right? I don't know how that works exactly, but
Well, yeah, I've never, I don't, because it's a reimbursement grant, somebody has to come up with the money. So whether to pay the bills, right? And then you get reimbursed. So if the town was doing that, the town would be reimbursed. I think, you know, one objective might, or one goal might be, as you're thinking about this, to avoid or reduce the number of interactions with private property, not necessarily the road itself,
Ah.
but actually people's like house lots, right? Because you could, along the privately owned roads, you could somehow negotiate easements along those, maybe that could, where you could have drainage structures. So you're not asking homeowners to pay for a structure. You're actually going to pay them potentially to have an easement across their land for stormwater management. I don't know. I'm just spitballing at this point because I have not
Yeah,
done a
right.
project like this before.
Well, we don't even have a project yet necessarily, but
No, but just like trying to answer some questions.
we have a
I'm
lot
like,
to think about.
yeah.
Right.
I know a lot of
Well,
people have their
let's hear from
hand.
Joe. Yeah, Joe had his hand up and so did Tracy. Joe, your question. Joe. All right, Tracy, why don't you ask yours? Maybe Joe will come back.
I'm on.
Oh, okay, you are. Right.
So my
Your
question,
question.
based on your conversation, we do have areas on like site 4, 2, and 3 where we could divert water through town property, which we already have access directly into the lake. Is that something that we could concentrate on first? Because it seems like after this conversation, probably the easiest thing to get done, because it doesn't involve the landowners who already have access to the lake, already have a pipe going directly into the lake through their property. And most of them, 2 of them just got them redone, so the pipes are pretty good size. But they may accommodate the water, because if you divert the water on site 4 down to the sawmill, and site 3 and 2 both have access through town property to the lake.
I think if there are town-owned parcels, that is a really smart places to be looking at first. And again, matching that with your findings of your H&H study. I mean, when I was doing some site visits, one thing that was interesting to me was that, is it King Road that's discontinued now? And that, I mean, just thinking about the part of that road that is now undrivable, can that be turned into some kind of location for a stormwater management feature?
Yeah, we looked at that one. Actually, that was a good run because that goes directly into the lake. And if you go a little further by diverting a couple of culverts, you can go right to the sawmill. So all that water on that side could be very easily diverted. On the other side of the lake, we did see that the town owns a piece of property that abuts the lake further down by the association hall. And maybe that's a site where instead of trying to go through someone's property and do everything, maybe putting like a manhole set up where they collect the water and that's the drainage for it. Like they do with roads.
Yeah, and this kind of brainstorming, like, I think is really great. And if you had an engineer, you know, like that, maybe you could talk to about some of these ideas as well, even before you're looking to get, you know, funding for the H&H study. I don't know if the town of Shutesbury has an existing relationship with an engineering firm or not. I know Fuss and O'Neill did your MVP plan, so you might be able to, you know, talk to somebody there about some of these ideas.
Another resource, and you might have seen it, I think we mentioned it in the watershed-based plan, is the UNH, University of New Hampshire Stormwater Center. And they have a couple of lake-specific assessments that they did where they were making specific recommendations. And so they're kind of function similar to, in my understanding, to an extension service. I mean, I think you pay for their services, but they're out in communities all across New England.
Tracy and Jim, is this a new hand that's up or a previous hand?
I'll take it down.
Okay, Tracy?
Yes, I just wanted to piggyback off what Joe was saying. I really do feel pretty good about the fact that we've identified a lot of town property that we could have water diverted to. There are places where water is going through private property with systems that people have tried to make as solid as possible, but may welcome having them improved. Because they're already taking that water anyway. I would assume that those places that are taking the water through systems they've installed is because that's where the water's naturally going. So that may, you know, that may be just fine for them. There's also town culverts that we've identified up on Wendell Road that we think may perhaps not have been planned well in terms of where they're being dumped, and that they can be you know, changed up based on this H&H study that could show us where they might be better placed. But I don't see us really needing to have to, like, you know, be knocking on the doors of a bunch of private property owners and saying, hey, we want to put water through your property. I don't see that as probably being necessary. So I'm not, you know, when I first heard that, I felt a stab in my heart too, Jim, but I'm feeling better about it now that I've really thought about what we've already accomplished with our site visits. I think we have a lot of potential places. And I think that Joe, of all of us, has like a vision of that. And I think he's right.
How about you, Eric?
Yeah, it just sort of seems to me that we're sort of boiling, well, to state this is a messy problem is obvious. But it seems to me that that is to say the town and the lake population, the Lake Wyola Association and so forth, ideally, I mean, is how we're talking about applying for all these grants for things to happen and all sound great. Who is we? I mean, does FERCog help? Can FERCog help lead us through this, or how does this happen? I mean, this just seems like an unbelievable pile of messy stuff to me to try to figure this out. That's all. And how do we do that? That's a long question, I suppose, but
Oh, we love unbelievable piles of messy
All right, good.
Oh, good. That's good.
Oh my gosh. So, um, so yes, the FERCOG does work with communities to help write grant applications. We have been lucky the past couple of years to have our own grants that fund our staff to do that. So we so Eric, are you one of the select board members?
Yes.
Yes. So you'll be receiving a letter about the 2025 District Local Technical Assistance, the DLTA funding that has been coming to the COG every year from the state. It's a pot of funding. And so we solicit all our towns and ask them what they need technical assistance with. Is it zoning work? Is it housing? Is it open space and recreation plans? So the town of Shutesbury could request some technical assistance from the COG through that DLTA funding to help sort through the messy pile and work with the task force to continue kind of developing a plan, working towards consensus, kind of having, you know, a shared understanding and vision for, you know, what the next steps are. You know, is that applying for grants, for example? Which grants would be applied for? How would that all come together? And so you know, that's one approach. We're waiting to hear from the DEP for a grant application we put in. I don't recall, Tanzin, if the next round of regional coordinator work, I mean, we might be able to use that funding. I don't know, but we haven't gotten that grant yet. And that has a different focus. So,
So the bottom line is to look for that DLT. That
look
seems
for
to
the,
me.
yeah, look for the DLTA letter that will be coming in January. We do have, I would have to talk to Jessica Atwood, who's the planning director, about this, but we do have another pot of DLTA funding that goes through June 30th that is supposed to be for paying for us to help develop grant applications. But right now where you all are is kind of like several steps before that. So I would have to get clearance on that. You know, if we could use that or not. So the bottom line is we're all grant funded at the COG, and so we have to have something to charge our time to.
Sure.
And so that's kind of the long-winded answer that yes, we can help you, but we just need to have a source of funding to do that. So
Well, things are complicated in Shutesbury just because we're between town administrators, and there's a lot. Believe me, we have a lot of balls up in here in this town.
Oh yeah,
and nobody catch them.
Yeah, I'm sure it's very, very difficult right now. But let us talk to Jessica about the DLTAA, which is that separate pot of funding. Keep an eye out for the 2025 letter that will be coming to the select board. And basically what you do is you list your three or four projects that you need help with, but you need to prioritize them. And then we look at all the requests that come in from the 26 towns, and it's a small pot of money. We try to allocate it as fairly as we can. I don't think that Shutesbury is requested anything under DLTA for a while?
They might
I'm
have
not
done
aware of anything.
culverts.
Oh, they did culverts,
Oh,
but
yeah, right, right.
they did culverts. Was that 3C or was it DLTA?
I actually don't know.
So anyway, we'll see what else we can do. But with helping you, I mean, I guess the message is we'll help you as much as we can, but it may be that you need to keep doing all the good work the task force is doing on their own. It
Right.
seems like you've done a lot of great work, so keep doing that while we see what we're able to do to help you.
So,
Meanwhile, I'll have Gabe make sure she looks out for that letter. Well, she'll see it first, this
Yeah,
interim town administrator.
And she's familiar with that because she used to work in Orange. Yeah. Yeah.
Yep. Okay. Thank you.
You're
Thanks
welcome.
a lot.
I'm mindful of the time and your time. I also, so moving forward, I'll have to say I'm a little bit more perplexed, but also that's not a bad, but that's not a bad thing. In other words, in terms of our task force work, I think that we did and have been pretty focused on identifying these micro drainage systems and ready to jump right in and get these projects done. What kind of funding would we have to raise to deal with the water flow from Wendell Road on these wrong-sized culverts, et cetera, et cetera. But it sounds like what I'm hearing is it's put the brakes on that and focus more on preparing to do a grant for the H&H study. Maybe these drainage systems that we've been looking at are part of what we use to focus the H&H study. But I think in our conversation just now, and forgive me to our committee, is that I've lost a little focus on what the best place is for us in terms of doing our work right now. We are to make a report to the select board, a recommendation. Clearly, the engineering study has got to be one of those recommendations. But I don't think we're now creating projects that we're going to implement, because we're saying the H&H study has to be the foundation for those projects. Is that right?
Well, I don't know. I mean, Tamsin, was much more, closely involved with all of this. I don't know if I would say, oh, disregard like these other drainage projects. I mean, I'm just not sure. Can you do both in parallel, or I'm not sure.
My thought in response, Jennifer, is doing an H&H study is going to help you prioritize implementation funding from the whole systems perspective, from the whole systems approach. And so that's just naturally why we recommend it. And that climate resilience piece, like just understanding, being able to predict future kind of volumes of water in the system. And DEP loves implementation projects, and they wouldn't necessarily say you need an H&H study first. And so I think if you can make a very, very clear case as to why one particular or a couple particular sites are ready to go, and you can come up with funding to get those sites properly designed. You're like, they look for, I don't know, Kimberly, 25% design in a 319 implementation proposal. And then they can pay for the rest of it.
Yeah, I mean, it depends how complicated the projects are, because they if it's just some culverts, they might be a little bit more lenient in terms of the level of design. But one thing that we need to keep in mind with the 319 program in particular, you always have to tie back to that water quality impairment, right? So if it's just culvert work or some drainage, stormwater drainage work, like we would have to look at that closely and see what kind of reduction in the pollutant loading that the project would have, because that affects the competitiveness. Whereas the MVP grant program doesn't have that kind of singular focus on water quality, right? It's the climate resiliency piece, it's the flood resiliency piece. It's the social resiliency piece, like if people's, basements and homes are routinely flooded, if the roads are getting washed out. So, the projects that you might have in mind to do now, may be better suited for the MVP program.
Yeah, I wanted to say we haven't really talked much about 604B by names, but 604B is sort of like it's provides a lot of funding to help set you up for applying for 319 implementation funding. So it will help with source tracking to identify specific sites. I don't think that's useful in your case, but it can pay for the modeling, like the H&H and the FGM study. And it can help pay for prioritization and design work. And when I was reading their language yesterday, it said an implementation plans. I don't know exactly what that means, but 604B is funding that can get you pretty much to the door of a 319 grant proposal. And so
That's
if you're
good.
struggling
That's
to
helpful.
come up with the money for, getting that design work done, getting that enough engineering perspective to be able to apply for 319, look to 604B.
Okay, got it. Mark, your hand is up.
My question is about the funding is that, what's an H&H study cost ballpark? Do you have a sense of that? Because, if is it in the $500,000 range or is it in the $50,000 range? And if it's in the low number, maybe, the town and different groups could merge funds together and just get it done. Or a follow-up question, is it worthwhile to go to Fuss and O'Neill and maybe other engineering companies who have worked around the lake to say, what's this cost?
I don't know what Kimberly would say, but I would recommend. Yeah, I think you could easily get a ballpark, especially if you can give them the they're gonna need the watershed acreage, but they could give you a ballpark.
Yeah, and I'm just thinking, what was the Keyup Brook watershed is probably smaller. I mean, it's not a $500,000. I was gonna
Actually,
say
I would think it would. Keyup Brook, I think, is probably bigger than Lake Wyola.
And what was that, like
I
40,000?
was about to look for it. I'll get back to you all.
Yeah, so it's like maybe 40,000, 45,000 ballpark, but an engineer could give you a closer estimate. So yeah, it could be something that the town and other entities could fund themselves.
Thank you.
Okay, great. So, okay, so Tom's question, and then I think we might want to move close to wrapping things up unless FERCog wants to go in for another half hour. And I know I saw a slide that had our list of questions on it. So let's just hear from Tom and then we'll talk about how we're feeling about continuing on. Tom?
Okay, I'll try to be quick. It's just a short question or two and maybe one meatier question. What is the name of that brook, please, that you said a few times? Keogh or in Buckland? I think
Oh, the Clesson Brook is where we've done a combined MVP and
spell that, please. Or
CLESSON. I don't know,
Okay.
Kimberly, would it be helpful to share some of those materials with them?
Sure, yeah.
And then the Keyup Brook system in
how do you spell that? Just, I can't hear.
KEYUP.
Okay. Thank you.
That's in Irving. That brook goes under like through Irving Center, and we have a grant application out right now to do similar work in that watershed, but we haven't heard back yet.
Okay. On the public-private thing, when you're just at the stage of getting an H&H or FGM study underway, if it is something that is on public and private land, do they need permission from private landowners to even do that study? Like, will they need to walk on some private land and everything? Just for the info gathering part of that study?
Kimberly, did we send landowner letters when Nick did the Clesson Brook FGM? Okay.
Yeah, and not for the H&H, but for the FGM, yeah, we typically contact the landowners and, or the town would, and say, the town is doing the study, you may see, you know, personnel walking along the brook or, typically, like, landowners are very, interested and, you know, want to maybe walk along, pick the scientist's or the engineer's brain while they're out there.
Does
Yeah.
the town have a right to do it, or may the people object to people coming?
I don't know about that. I mean, like Tamsin said earlier, technically, like the middle, walking up the middle of this brook, like it's public, you know, property, but I think just from a, you know, you want to engage people and have them be supportive. So if somebody said, absolutely do not come on my land, I would honor that, and it wouldn't necessarily throw a monkey wrench into
Okay.
the project. Yeah, if one or two landowners decided they didn't want to participate, you know, have anybody walk their property.
May I ask a question of levity? Do you say the cog when you become part of FERCog? Because it sounds as though you both say the cog.
I refer to it as the cog. Yeah.
Okay, it's just been an interesting learning. Tonight. Thank you.
I think people say both.
Yeah.
I've never heard the cog before.
Well, it
Yeah.
just sounds funny to say, I work at Franklin Regional Council of Governments instead of the Franklin Regional Council of Governments.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sorry.
And I always, when I'm writing, I always say the FERCog. So, yeah.
So speaking of the FERCog, oh wait, Eric's got his hand up. Eric.
No, this question is too big for this meeting, but it seems to me that one of the big issues here is that we sort of have this whole public-private, public, who, what's this? What if the town owned all the land, all the roads? I'm not advocating that. I'm
It
throwing
would
it
be
out there
much easier.
for discussion. That's my point, is that a lot of this would be, it seems a lot easier at some level. I'm not, there'd be other problems. I'm suggesting that, I'm not suggesting this, I'm not advocating, I'm just sort of thinking out loud, but, well, anyway, I just throw that out there, that's all. But it seems to me that part of what we're doing is we're trying to make this all harder than it has to be, or to some level, or it is hard, put it that way. That's all. I quit.
Well, that's thinking out of the box. That's good, Eric. I like that kind of out of the box thinking.
Well, that's, you know, I don't know.
That's what we got to think about.
Eminent domain.
I was thinking that, but I didn't have the, you know, backbone to say it out loud.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
I don't know, can you just put an easement on a on a privately owned road without owning it outright?
I think you'd have to compensate the landowner. Like, yeah,
Yeah.
you can take an easement kind of in the, you know, public good or for the public good, but you probably wouldn't want, you would probably want or hope that people would do it voluntarily.
Well, if the roads are owned by the Lake Wyola Association, if I was in the Lake Wyola Association, I'd say, you want to buy the roads? They'll cost you $1. You can have them. Seriously. And then, you know, if you'll fix them and plow them and do all this stuff with FERCog and on and on and on, why not?
It's a win-win.
Yeah.
But and I will just say, historically, I do remember there was a huge fight years ago about roads down on the other end of town.
Yeah.
They're public, they're still private roads, like Wyola roads. And it was just I remember being at that town meeting. It was not fist fights, but it was close. You know, it's like, really. So I'm just saying that there may be people that would be very opposed to that, including my other select board members. I don't know. I don't know.
Mum's the word on that one, Eric. Or, you know, like have the whole road system be part of a conservation area,
Or
you know, where there's, yeah, something like that. Now, Bob Douglas, who is on our committee, he's a Concom member here in Shutesbury and in another town in Massachusetts, has his hand up here. So I think if we can hear from Bob, that would be great.
Great. Thanks very much, Jennifer. Yeah, no, if it was a motion from Eric Stocker, I would certainly second it to have the
it wasn't a motion.
No, I know it wasn't. But I think it's a good idea to have the roads owned by the town. Certainly town services, fire, ambulance, and snow plows come down those roads. And professional management of them would be a benefit to everybody, whether you lived on the roads or not. So anyway, I think that's a fine idea, Eric, just to give my 2 cents as well.
And Tracy.
I would just say it's not my idea. I'm just throwing it out there for discussion.
Well, you wouldn't,
Tracy.
Eric, you wouldn't be the first one to come up with that idea, and
I know, I probably wouldn't.
Stand with you. But I just also want to point out that not only are the roads owned by the Lake Wyola Association, but also the drainage system, the ditches on the side of the road, like those are all the right of way for the Lake Wyola Association. That is not private property owners. So, you know, that would be, you wouldn't be dealing with for everything that we would be looking at doing would involve the roads and the drainage system. The only time you're going to be dealing with private property owners is if a system cuts through their property, and there's a couple locations that occurs. And again, I would say that those folks probably would be thrilled to have a professional system put in rather than the things they've had to try to jimmy together, you know, and maintain. So yeah, I mean, we already have the roads are already plowed by the town. The trash is already picked up by the town. You know, we're this close to being, you know, completely maintained, you know, by the town. And it just makes sense. It's 5 miles of roads with more and more year-round residents in a watershed. It's going to start to, you know, it's going to start to deteriorate. Lake Wyola Association, it's impossible for them to keep up with it. There's just, it's just impossible.
So Tamsin.
I decided to get in line this time.
Yeah.
So I just looked up our proposal about Keyup Brook. It's basically the same size watershed. The H&H, I think because it's mostly a desktop work and not like, you know, a lot of labor hours out in the field. The estimate we were given for that was 17,000, just 17 and a half. And then the fluvial geomorphic assessment is more expensive. For Keyup Brook, it would be 30,000 about. But I guess I'm thinking because you go up Fisk Brook from Lake Wyola to Fisk Pond, and then the other Plimpton Pond or whatever the other one is there. I don't know that you would necessarily want to do the entire watershed. You could focus it on the area between the next 2 ponds up. Maybe Kimberly, you would disagree. I'm not sure, because we do promote a whole systems approach.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, this is a kind of a unique situation. So yeah, I think it would be interesting to get an opinion from an engineer and a geomorphologist, how they would approach it and what the potential costs would be. But that, you know, that gives you a ballpark. It's not $500,000.
Good.
Oh,
And Tracy, is that a new hand? No, it's an old hand. Okay. Now, Kimberly and Tamsin, do you have other things that you wanted to share or touch on that you feel are important before we wrap things up for today? I know we gave you a lot of questions. I think we've kind of come at them, some directly, some more tangentially, and some might have come in at a level that we're not even ready for if we're going to really put our focus on trying to get funding for these studies. But where do you think would be a good place for a resting place for us at this point?
Kimberly, you said that we would be willing to. I don't have anything else to share. I think there's plenty more to talk about. I think that you guys might have some stuff to digest, and then you can really come back to us with what kind of feels like your most pertinent questions, your most pressing questions, now that you've sort of agreed on like more of a path forward after this meeting. And Kimberly, I think I heard you say that we'll let the town know just how available we are for support, whether that's one more meeting, you know, because we don't really have access to funding for this, or whether we do have more funding for more consistent support. Does that sound right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I can send the slides. The slides have like a little bit more information on those grants, if you didn't have time to read them while they were sort of up in the middle of our discussion. But really the place to go is the non-point source pollution website, programs website. And then I don't know if it would help you to see some example pieces of some proposals or final reports
think
that
it
we've
would.
done in the past.
Yeah, I think it definitely would.
yeah. I was thinking not necessarily the proposals, Tamsin, but the like the Klessenbrook watershed-based plan and FGM and H&H study, because they were developed kind of concurrently.
Yeah.
I think that would be the best example to share.
Okay. The
That would be
Klessenbrook
wonderful.
is very focused on river restoration projects and some transportation, drainage infrastructure projects. It's not so much oriented towards these the kinds of drainage systems that you guys have that are going through kind of residential areas. So just that would be my one caveat. And then oh, I had one more thought. Oh, I wouldn't. Okay, when it comes to me, I'll bring it up.
I also wanted to say that I think it's my sense that the BMP part of your report requires these studies and whatnot that we've been discussing, but that the maintenance and management policies and practices can get recommended and implemented straight away. You know, they wouldn't need coordination with the engineering study. Same thing with public education. You know, maybe this happens in phases, but I think that we can get started on some things that wouldn't require further study, but with just application of different maintenance and management practices. Is that your sense too, or does the whole thing want to be more like of a piece?
No, I think getting started with especially residential stormwater management education would be really useful for you. Infiltration, filtration. And I guess the other piece, I'm not clear. When I was talking about the 604B program, I said that can help you get a lot of prioritization and design work done. And I want to make sure that you're not like that is a chunk of work, and that requires funding too. And so if the town were to somehow able to pay for these studies without DEP funding, I would still encourage you to find funding for engineering work.
Yeah, I got that. Okay, so
And like particularly interpretation of those studies. Yeah.
any other questions or comments? I don't think we'll need a public comment period. I mean, Mark is here. He would be the only person I see who's here who wouldn't be on our committee. But Mark, do you have any final comments you want to add before we move on to adjourn?
Yeah, one is just another a source for technical support in terms of geese management. And I know you guys said you didn't really have that expertise, but years ago we managed the geese population through egg addling and various other means, and those have all gone. So we're kind of expecting the geese population to go up. And my question that I had originally sent to you was, what's the is there a number? Is there a maximum amount of geese or ballpark population in a lake, an area like Lake Wyola can support safely without it affecting, wildlife or humans? And I know you guys don't necessarily have the answer to that, but where would we get the answer to that is my question.
The only thing that comes to mind is maybe contacting the Army Corps of Engineers at the Tully Lake Dam. I know that they had a goose problem in the recreational area around Tully Lake. And this was years ago. I think they brought in dogs. I don't know what else they did, but that might be a place to start. I drove through the UMass campus the other day and was shocked. Whatever that pond is,
The campus pond.
the campus pond, literally, it was like completely covered with Canada geese. I could not believe how many geese were there. I couldn't even see the water hardly. I think it's a problem that so many places struggle with, and I don't know what you do to get rid of them. I don't think you can get rid of them. They just come back. But
Christmas dinner.
Oh,
yeah. Do they addle the eggs and stuff? I don't know. I don't know what they do with that. Maybe like Google. Have you Googled it, Mark?
Well, we used to addle the eggs, and then the geese got smarter and they moved upstream, so they moved to private property, and so we could no longer addle them. It's like it's actually kind of nice to have a few geese on the lake. You got two families of geese, and it's kind of interesting. But when it comes to a certain number, and I don't know what that number is, but does the Board of Health get involved? And geese management should be on as the same priority as beaver management. And I just looking for, it'd be nice to have some kind of help, just to help to find, when does it become a problem? Is it E. coli measurements? Is it, just trying to look for resources there.
It would be a good student project at UMass. Somebody over there ought to like undergrads or grad students on figuring out what to do with their campus pond problem. Jeez. I actually like stopped because there was no traffic behind me because I couldn't believe what I was seeing. There were that many.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I've seen that too.
UMass students come to the State Beach. There's a class that comes there every so often. I don't know what they're doing, but they do something with the water. They take boats out and test what kind of fish are in there.
Tracy, last question.
I just wanted to say that I spoke with the manager over at the State Beach asking about, the fact that they've had the beach closed so many days, and they did the same thing last year. And they do a different test than the Lake Wyola Association beaches do. They do the enterococci test, and they do believe that it's because of geese. So most likely that is the source, and so maybe some collaboration with the state DCR might be a good idea, because I'm sure that they would like to solve this problem. They were closed 60 days in the summer of 2023, and I don't know how many it ended up being this summer. It's a lot of the
So I want to thank you both for taking the time to meet with us. We really appreciate your report, first of all, because that's our jumping off point. And we're getting some perspective on what we should do with it. But it's super helpful, and you've been very generous. And we want to thank you both for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
And then in terms of our group, I will send an email around to find a meeting time in January. And then I think the only thing we need is someone to make a motion to adjourn.
So move.
I'll
And
second.
seconded. Okay, and we'll have a vote then. Tracy,
McNaughton, I.
Wallace, aye.
Douglas, aye.
Jane,
Aye.
aye.
Stalker eye.
Salvador,
I think that's everybody.
Thank you, Tamsin and Kimberly.
Yeah,
Thank
thank
you
you.
very much.
Thank you so much.
Our follow-up email to you probably won't come until January because we're up against deadlines and the holiday right now.
Okay, oh yeah, and forgot all about that. Happy holidays to
Happy
everybody.
holidays. Happy New Year.
Okay,
Yeah.
All right.
bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye. Good night.
Take
Everyone.
care.
Bye.
Bye for now.